Hi there, Simon from simonwoods.com here. Today we're on port. How much port do you drink? For me it's like 2 or 3 bottles a year, if that. And the thing is, I love the stuff. I love it, but often it comes out at the end of a meal where now we're all a bit sensible and you don't maybe drink quite as much as we used to do. And also it's confusing. I've started this video about 8 times now, and each time I've got to a stage where I think, no, if I say that, then I have to say that, and if we go there, then we have to go there. Let's try and make port not very confusing at all. First one I've got here, Reserve Port from Quinta Nova. And the idea with this port is all about young, juicy fruit. So I look at the colour of it, and it's a ruby port. It's red in colour, shows it's been bottled when it was young. It doesn't say ruby on the label, but it is a ruby port. And I stick my nose in, and it smells like it's young and fresh. It smells like maybe it's not brand new vintage, maybe there's some bit of 2-year-old wine in there, maybe there's some 3 or 4-year-old wine in there to add a bit of mellowness. But it smells velvety, it smells warm and welcoming, which is what you want from a port. Yes, it's juicy, but at the same time it's fresh. There's a juicy, warm, weighty, almost like velvet textured edge of berries and plums there. But there's also this hint of citrus that I get there. And there's structure there, there's fragrance, and there's acidity that cleans my mouth up and makes me think, yeah, I could almost drink that with some red meat or something like that. If you have some sauces for red meat that have a sweet edge, stick a bit of that in the sauce, drink it with it. I'm not guaranteeing what you're going to be like the next morning if you have. This is a half bottle, so maybe half bottle over the course of a large steak and maybe some cheese afterwards. That would be, sounds pretty nice actually. Okay, next couple. This one's here from the same people, Quinta Nova de Nossa Senhora do Carmo, 2005 LBV. Now LBV stands for late bottled vintage. What on earth does that mean? Well, I was saying before about that idea of a ruby port. The great ruby port is called vintage port, and the idea there is if it was a fabulous year, what they'll do is they'll get a wine, blend it to how they want it, from everything from that one particular year, stick it in a barrel for a couple of years, then put it in a bottle, and you get something bottled that is almost black in colour and very intense. And will last for ages. It's got alcohol in there, it's got sugar, it's got tannin, and it's got acidity. Everything in there will make it last for a long time. But we don't all have the time and the space to sell a vintage port for 30 or 40 years. So the idea with LBV is they keep it in barrel for a bit longer, so it softens a bit more, mellows a little bit more, keep it in there for like 4 to 6 years, and then bottle it, and you end up with something that's maybe not as fine as a great vintage port, but is certainly more user-friendly when it's released. Now this one's 2005 and bottled in, 2005 vintage, bottled in 2009. And it smells so young. It smells, if you've ever been to a winery at vintage time, when they're making red wine, it just smells like that. It smells of grape must. There's this heady aroma. What's the word? Oh, that's powerful, peppery, heaps and heaps of black fruit. There's this sweetness there, but there's also this lovely spice, fragrance. There's a dusty, if you've been to the Douro, you go in the vineyards and they're bone dry a lot of the time. It doesn't rain very much there. And there's this dry, dusty edge to the air, and you're getting that dry, dusty, herby character coming through. I think that's extremely tasty. Okay, so we've been on Quinta Nova, now we're on Quinta do Noval, the well-known port house, Quinta Noval. This is their LBV, and it's a couple of years older, so 2003, bottled in 2008. So a year longer in barrel. Now 2003 was a really warm year in the Douro. And I smell this, and I smell something which is maybe almost just a bit too hot, a bit too raisiny. It doesn't smell classy. It smells extremely intense, but I do get a bit of almost as if it's been in barrel just that bit too much and has started to oxidise. It's 5 years. They released Tawny ports. We've got a 10-year-old Tawny coming up from Noval, so it'll be interesting to see the difference between this and that. 5 years in barrel, average of 10 years in barrel. Yeah, and I find that I like that hit of ripe fruit, but I think that I wish they'd bottled that just a bit earlier, because it's lost a lot of it, that youthful freshness. 2003 wouldn't have been as fresh as others, and I think they've made a mistake with that. I'd have bottled that earlier. So the 10-year-old Tawny. Now, when it says 10-year-old now on there, it's 2009 now. This doesn't mean it's from the 2000. I'll get this the right way around. It's 2009 now. This doesn't mean that it's from the 1999 vintage. It means that it tastes like a wine it tastes like a 10-year-old Tawny. There's a panel that sits there and sort of will have a look at these things and think, oh yeah, that tastes like a 10-year-old, that tastes like a 20-year-old. So there's probably there might even be some 2003 wine in here, but there might be some that's considerably older. So there'll be everything almost like from 3 or 4-year-old wine to 15, 20-year-old wine. The idea is to blend something that tastes like a 10-year-old Tawny should. And you notice the colour. It's deeper. It's still, because it's only had average of 10 years, there's still a little bit of redness to it. If you get 20-year-old Tawnies, those tend to be my favourites. 20-year-old is great. 30-year-old and 40-year-old you can get, but I tend to find those just a bit on the woody side. But this one smells like treacle toffee, caramel, raisins. Oh, coffee, really good. Yeah, and what's happened is the fruit, any hint of there's no idea of keeping the freshness in the fruit here. What they want to do is to promote those more caramel rich, raisiny edges, but there's still an edge of freshness there. There is acidity, and that oxidation is adding like a slightly nutty walnut tang to it, which is very, very tasty. The advantage of wines like this is because they've done that oxidation and the development in barrel, they're not going to fall over if you keep the bottle for a few weeks. So whereas something like the reserve port, you almost need to drink that within, I'd say, 3 or 4 days. The LBV might last a couple of weeks, if that, maybe a week. Something like a Tawny you can probably keep for 2 or 3 months, and it wouldn't tail off. The only trouble about this is for me what I call match of the day wine. This is what I drink if I've had a bottle of wine with dinner, and I just need a little extra something to have with match of the day. A glass of this would be perfect. See you soon.